Good evening, I'm Geraldine Sin.
And I'm Matthew Ngalovakondoa.
Following the aftermath of Tropical Cyclone Josie and Tropical Cyclone Kenny, thousands of Fijians were affected by the floods that had caused substantial damage to their properties and their belongings. To cater for those that required financial assistance, the Fiji National Provident Fund allowed its members to apply for flood assistance under the National Disaster Withdrawal Scheme. They also recently held a retirement expo to educate members on proper financial planning, since the majority of members have less than $10,000 in their accounts. Here to discuss these topics in details, we have our guest for tonight, FNPF CEO Mr. Chao Chikoroi. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, given all the devastation that many people suffered with the recent weather patterns that had happened, FNPF, of course, had gone out and helped those that were in need, but they also kept in mind that they were trying to avoid getting duped, for lack of a better word, I could say. That's why you had your teams go out and assess them, and of course those assistance forms weren't available everywhere. You had your teams handing them out. How were those carried out? Was it successful?
Yes, I think let me start by saying that cyclones and adverse weather is becoming a reality for us now. So what does that mean in terms of FNPF, in terms of meeting members' expectations or members' demands under those circumstances? So the normal, the board allows the fund to consider assisting members in the event of natural disasters. So the process for us is to ensure that members who are actually in need for this assistance are actually given that assistance. So the process is really in this particular case in the West, as you know, there were two cyclones, so we have to demobilize in the middle of the process and remobilize again. Actually, we had 10 teams on the ground. Soon after, I think 2 days after the cyclone, we were there on the ground. These teams comprise about 3 or 4 members, and they have actually an office that they take to the field. So they actually go out there and work closely with the Commissioner Western's office. The Commissioner Western's office actually gives us the areas that needs attention. So our team goes there, check those areas, validate them on the ground. If they don't have their cards, we assess them, and then we give out the form to them to see that their places were actually affected by the cyclone.
This, of course, would be a measure to ensure that no one would be taking advantage of the funds that, of course, would be available, even though people may say that it's my money, I can do with it what I want. For example, if my house has been damaged or my property has been damaged, I need that assistance. But you're also keeping in mind that they need to have some of that money saved up for them. Now, as of the 26th of April, you had paid out up to $11.3 million, correct?
Yes, the total number of forms that we distributed to members was about 14,500. As of 26th, we had actually assisted or paid out over 13,400 members have actually received what they applied for, and it's around 11.3 million in total.
But just going back to what you had spoken about earlier, concerning cyclones, natural disasters, you are right that it'll become more frequent. Obviously, this will become a problem because the more cyclones we have, the more members will be digging into their FNPF account. Yeah. In your professional opinion, what would be the best course of action for people living in flood-prone areas, let's say?
We actually, the board is also exploring what we call a parametric insurance scheme, where it actually triggers during these types of events. So rather than the members drawing on their accounts, there's actually a fund that can meet the members during these times of disasters. It's still very, very early and exploratory at this stage, but I think from the board's perspective, we are looking into this, and this is the reality of the situations that we are in. We can't allow members to continually dip into their funds because it's solely for the retirement. So there are options that we are considering, but obviously we will go through that process. But as you said, it's something that we have to plan for.
Of course, this is allowed for by the FNPF Act 2011, where in the act of a natural disaster, you would be helping out your members. Now, the $1,000 was for immediate relief. However, there were those who were pretty badly affected. So for that, you also made provisions for the quick repairs for up to $5,000.
Quick repairs is a normal assistance. There are requirements that they have to bring to the fund. But the intent of the natural disaster was for immediate relief. when we go to the ground, you actually see the realities of what's happened on the ground. I mean, people lost everything. So the natural disaster assistance was supposed to be a quick relief for them to start on with their lives. You know.
Do you think that with the $1,000 that was given out with the flood assistance, do you happen to think that maybe it would have been helped out by the Prime Minister's relief packages that were given out as well to help out those, so that it would create less of a financial burden on those that would need to get started with moving on with their lives after the floods?
Because I think from the government there was basically the rations, you know, food rations was the immediate, water, you know, infrastructure was their priority. But for those who are affected, who has the ability to draw on their FNPF, that's why we were providing those assistance.
All of these assistance that they can apply for, of course, most people don't realize this, FNPF being a superannuation fund, 100% of course is not all that you can draw from, because sometimes when they come up and they want to ask for money, then you would tell them you can't take that much out, we're not allowing you. You do have provisions, of course, for various types of withdrawals. However, there's two different types of accounts and most people don't know about that. Please clarify.
Okay, in 2012, 2011, when we introduced the new FNPF, it just come through a massive series or package of reforms, including the provisioning level, the preservation for retirement, because FNPF's sole purpose is for retirement. But unfortunately, in our cases in Fiji, we are using it like a social security. Members can access part of it while they're still working, because all members have a need while they're still working, need for housing, need for education, need for medical. In the true sense of superannuations, they don't have this facility. You give this money, you only touch it when you retire. But in Fiji, because there are no, there's absence of other social safety nets, so FNPF provides for this. Unfortunately, it's been overused over a period of time, and the result is members are retiring with low balances. Part of the reform was to basically change the preservation rule. Previously, members can access up to 2/3 of their balances while they're still working. Remember that, 2/3. In 23 grounds of withdrawals. You want to buy a laptop, you come to FNPF. So all these were there in the old, before the reforms. When we reform, we bring down the grounds of withdrawals to the core 5. And we also change the preservation rule, where members now have 2 accounts. When contributions comes to us, or even when we pay interest, it goes 30% to your general account and 70% for your preserve account. 70% will only be touchable when you reach the retirement age. 30% is what you can access while you're still working.
And even after retirement, can you access the 30 as well, or will it be inclusive as part of the 70?
You take the 100% while you retire, but while you're still working, you can only touch 30.
But just to go back in terms of relief, we spoke about the West and how that's done. Right now, your team is in Kandavu. Can you tell me what's happening there right now?
Kandavu, yes, we have visited most, I think the feedback from the ground actually this morning, they provide daily feedback to us. They've touched most of the villages because not all villages have FNPF.
Okay.
So there are few, I think at the moment there's close to 100 members have accessed their, been given forms to fill. There was also some assistance in Lambasa. About 50 members or 37 members actually were assisted, those that actually houses were flooded.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kore. We'll be back with more after the break. Welcome back. Now, Mr. Kore, earlier on in the previous segment, you mentioned about the fact that people before, members actually, they could access up to 2/3 of their account while they were still working.
Yes.
And now you've made changes to that way. It's 70% preserved, 30% for general. Now, most people will be confused about what does that actually mean. 70% while you're working, you can't touch. That's for your retirement, for your pension, if you were to have a scheme in place. 30% would cover all of your different withdrawal types, am I right?
While you're still working.
While you're still working. Yeah. That would include, of course, your housing loans, your education assistance,
education, medical, funeral,
and of course with this as well, natural disasters. So all of that, of course, adds up.
Yes, it adds up, and That's where we're coming in terms of members needs to plan for their, for their retirement. Yes, before retirement, we'll all have our needs. Students, children will need to go to universities. You may have a condition that you need to go to the medical, through the medical scheme. So these are the things that you have to plan for, or members have to plan for. If you have a child that's growing up and you need to education, you preserve those balances for those types. So it requires us to actually change the way we think about the FNPF, rather than just, because we see a lot of members that turn up when they come to withdraw, need some money. They don't actually have a plan. Okay, I can keep these for my, for those five basic needs, particularly medical, housing, and education. Luckily, education is now becoming, like through the scheme with government, you can you can actually pay your own education. But for overseas and for students you want to send abroad, these are some of the opportunities for taking money out.
Before it used to be 23 different types of withdrawals that you could make. Now, of course, you've limited that down. But do you still think that that's too many options that you're giving them to touch your own money? I can understand that's your own hard-earned money. But just think about it. Not everybody would be, savvy enough to think about how am I going to balance that. They may have a large family, or they may not be thinking of towards the future. Do you think that this is too many options? You'd like to limit that further, or maybe have some sort of consultation with them to sort of tell them not to touch that money?
I think it goes back to my point earlier, because there's very few other social safety nets that are available for our members. So FNPF is like providing for that pool. If you have a medical condition that you need private doctors to attend to, basically you have, if you're uninsured, which is most cases in Fiji, then this is an opportunity for you to access it. So it is a good point, but we have taken out from those that were totally unnecessary and in some cases abused in the past.
So you spoke about that as well already, but one thing you also highlighted in the beginning was the fact the majority of members have like 10,000 or under 10,000.
I said 73%.
Yeah.
And not to mention, from that 10,000, it came out in a report earlier this week, if they were to retire, they'd be living on $17 a week, and that's scary.
So that would be a pension payout. Say, for example, if I were to retire tomorrow, I've got $10,000. So that's all I get. That's all you can live on. Yeah,
I think the 73% can be, because that applies to those that are even still working. They've got another 5, 10, 20 years. The worrying one is the worry is really for those that will be retiring in the next 5 years or next year and have those low balances. If you're retiring 10 years from now, at least you have time to have adequate time to change. You can do voluntary, or you can do additional contributions and have a plan for your retirement. So what we have, the stats that we have currently is a reflection or an outcome of the policies that we had in the past.
Okay.
The preservation policy that we changed in 2012 will take effect in the next 10 years.
And with those about to retire who are on 10,000, is FNPF trying to help them in any way to generate income, or have you tried to steer them in the direction of a way that they can?
Unfortunately, it's very little that we can do. We can, like if you have 5 years, we can encourage you to make additional contributions. Don't take your withdrawals. Keep your withdrawals for retirement. Don't unnecessarily take it for other reasons. So these are some of the measures that we can take. But the change in the preservation policy will only work effectively for those that have a longer term to.
Now, you've worked on the ground a lot in terms of dealing with people. What do you think is the biggest, apart from natural disasters, of course, what are the reasons? People could come and take the money for, their funerals, medical, of course, but some would lie about these sort of things. Like, for instance, if they were to use, is there any way that they can withdraw money in terms of cultural proceedings or anything like that?
There's still expectations that they can come to the FNPF and like weddings and and particularly weddings, or birthdays. 21st birthday, they want to do an elaborate birthday, can I use my FNPF? But so there's a counseling, and there's also awareness that we need to create with the members. I think the important thing is
so family and cultural obligations play a big part in members withdrawing the money as well.
Yes, it's part of what we value. So I think the important thing is we need to set that is that is not from FNPF.
When you said about those who are about to retire soon and they happen to have low balances as it is, when they do retire, you mentioned something about additional contributions that they can make. Currently, right now, the standard is 8% for the employee, 10% for the employer, and your maximum contribution is 30%. That means an excess of 12%.
Additional.
Additional.
Yeah.
So who pays that? Just the member?
The member. The member can pay additional 12%, so it makes it 30% contributions directly to FNPF. And you can choose where you want to put that additional 12%. The 18% is mandatory, 10 from the employer and 8% from the employee. But from the employee, if you want additional contributions, you can top that up to 30%. You can put another 12%. And you can choose where you want to put, to voluntary, to your general account or to your preserve account.
So basically there will be 20% for the employee, sorry, for the member, and then just 10% for the coming in that way. I see.
Now, in terms of changing mindset, I'm sure you have awareness teams that are out and about educating the members.
Yeah, if you recall last year, we also did a restructure where we have to actually, because of the IT and other things, the new requirement for the fund, we actually created this advocacy team. What we have now realized that one-to-one is more effective.
Yeah.
Generally giving general messages will create some impact, but it's not actually affecting members. So when you work with a member, you use a calculator to say, okay, this is your current balance, you'll retire with this at the current trend. Is that enough for you?
Yeah.
That actually motivates the member or empowers the member to look at other options.
Thank you for that, Mr. Corey. Now, I believe that you also had a retirement expo that was held earlier on, but we'll delve into that right after the break. Welcome back to the show. Now, Mr. Corey, earlier on, FNPF held its Retirement Expo. That, of course, was a wonderful initiative in itself, given, of course, since the stats that were released, 73% of members having less than $10,000, and then not knowing how to manage those funds, not only until retirement, but also after retirement. How has the response been?
We're quite delighted with the response. It's exceed our expectations in terms of the interest. But the whole objective is to create awareness. And also empower the members on what opportunities and choices are out there. It's done through the Financial Literacy Working Group. There were a lot of exhibitors and also supporters who are there to do this expo.
I went through a lot of your IECs. In fact, I went there yesterday, signed up with a couple of insurance firms, really good stuff. However, I noticed that majority of your IEC materials are in English. Is there any way in the future that you're going to have them in different languages?
For some of them, we are actually translating them to other the vernaculars, Itaukei and Hindu. So that process is happening, and our team, the advocacy team, are actually mixed in terms of their.
Part of the reason why I bring this up because I have been in FNPF a couple of times, and I've noticed families who've lived in the rural areas come.
Yes.
So when they come to file, probably lodge something, they're not really sure, understand certain processes.
Yeah.
And I believe informations like the pamphlets that you have go a great way in helping those.
Yeah.
So if you were to, how many languages are you looking at the moment?
Actually, the three main ones, English, Itaukei, and the Hindu.
Taking a step back, though, to the expo itself, that was it proved quite successful. You had to extend it until, I think, Saturday. It was supposed to end on Friday.
Yes, based on demand, particularly from working groups, they want to demand for another extension. And I think the good thing is we have all these financial banks and financial companies are out there. So it's like a one-stop shop where you can browse through and actually talk to them and see what options or opportunities are out there.
Looking at retirement itself, most people don't really have much of an idea. Basically, once we join the workforce, I know Matthew and I are doing the same thing. You start working and you just realize, the employer is putting money into the FNPF. I'm giving my contributions. It's going to be there. I retire. I'm going to have my money. But then again, the reality is quite different because you retire and then you have all that money. A lot of people just take it out on lump sum and then they don't manage it well.
Yes, that's the retirement plan. As I said, first is awareness. Awareness meaning, okay, what's out there, understanding my situation. That I think is the first, which empowers the members. This is my current balance, and if I continue to contribute at this rate, I will retire with this amount. Is that sufficient for me? Is that sufficient for what I planned for? How much that will equate to in terms of the money that I will get on a monthly basis? Is that sufficient? So if you have enough time, you can plan for those things.
You have 3 different types of retirement plans, right? One is, of course, your pension that you can receive. That's calculated, of course, with the amount of money that you have. And say, for example, what type of, how much you would be receiving, rather. I'm sorry, getting all tongue-tied. And the second one is term annuity.
That's right.
Most people don't know about that.
Yeah.
And then you also have partial or full lump sum withdrawal.
Yes.
What's the difference between partial withdrawal, lump sum withdrawal, or with term annuity?
The first common one is life pension. Life pension meaning it continues to pay until member passes away or the pensioner passes away. And there's 2 types. You can do a sole or a joint. Sole meaning it's only for me. Joint, I can cover the spouse for it. So there's 2 actually covers. If I pass on, then the nominee or the spouse continues to be covered until they passes. So it's a life pension. The term only goes for a term, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. So within that time, it finishes. If you continue to live after that, then there's no money that supports you.
So
from
with that,
this
you would mean, say, for example, I have $25,000
Yeah.
upon retirement, and if I take term annuity for 5 years, you'd be paying out that money within 5 years, and then after 5 years, all my $25,000 is gone, and that's
right.
it.
Yeah.
So how does this help? Why is this an option?
It assists those that may have conditions that and also those that are low balances. I can enjoy. Some people actually have medical conditions that I'm not going to live that far. I might stretch my money within the next 5 years or 10 years. And the rates are a bit better than the life pension.
With the pension that you give out, and of course with the partial or full lump sum withdrawal that you have, I know for a fact a lot of people would like to think, okay, I'm going to withdraw, I'm going to retire rather, and I'm going to take out all my money. I'm going to take out half, and then I'm going to take out half later. But would you advocate for them to do that, or to go for a life pension?
The best thing is know your condition and have a plan, have a retirement plan. Actually know how much do you want to live with. Because when we retire, we won't get a normal monthly or fortnightly salary that we have. So how would we live our life? With $200 sufficient, with $500 sufficient, or $1,000? Because we all have different life conditions that we live with. So I think that's the important thing. Will I live in Suba? Can this meet my expectations? So these are the realities that we need to start thinking about. And this is the whole idea of creating awareness and trying to have members to have a plan.
Well, in the past, FNPF has done a wonderful job, because I remember when I was still in high school, I was 16 years old, and FNPF did an awareness drive throughout the country. They visited the Western Division when I was schooling there, and I actually signed up. And I've been using that same account from when I was 16 until now when I started working, and I think that's a wonderful idea.
So in other words, you have lots of money, Geraldine.
Well...
But having said that, going to the expo yesterday, I noticed a lot of interesting things. One in particular, your website and mobile apps that you have. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's part of trying to improve our service level to ensure that services are done. Members don't have to come to FNPF to actually engage with us. So you can register online, check your balance online. There are a lot more activities that you can do with us while at the comforts of your home and using your platform.
So no more long lines, no more waiting, filling out forms.
Yeah.
You can just sit at home and watch your money grow.
Yeah, and even you can, if you want to withdraw, you can download the form, fill online and submit online. So, it's something that we are trying to improve in the future. It's part of our strategy, digital strategy, to make sure that our level of engagement with our members improves, particularly with the digital platforms.
Thank you for that, Mr. Koroy. We'll be back with more after the break. Welcome back. Now, Mr. Croy, Matthew mentioned about your online portal, and of course with the My FNPF app that's out there. This is wonderful, especially moving forward in a digital age. People having access to their funds. You can also track your fund itself. You know, how much money do you have? What would you like to withdraw, or what you'd like to do? All of those things. Looking at your work that your employees do. Have you been able to streamline those processes? Because sometimes you'd fill in a form and you'd hand it in, and it'd take about 3 to 4 months.
Yeah. Hopefully those are the things of the past, because we launched our new promise system a few years back, which actually automates this process. In the past, it used to be a normal manual process, where you lodge manually, this form is transferred somewhere, they process it somewhere, and then payments is done somewhere else. Now it's a totally automated process. Once you get all your requirements, you give it to us. We'll basically upload those requirements, and anybody sitting anywhere can approve those withdrawals. And turnaround time we expect to, particularly for the most common ones, is 1 or 2 days turnaround time. So housing takes a bit longer because there's a different process in terms of the requirements that we have to go through.
Speaking of housing, for people who'd like to take out a loan to build their first house, you allow them to dig into their
51, preserve account.
Preserved account.
Because housing, you need a bit more money, and I think home ownership is something that we encourage members to have, because that's part of social security. It's part of retirement. If you retire with your own house, at least you.
So you're trying to say that it would be easier for them to dig into their superannuation fund and access that money instead of taking a loan out from a financial institution?
Because sometimes your balance is not enough, because the requirements from the financial institution is normally 30%. And if you take, and when you start working, most of the time you don't have enough money. Yeah? Because it's also a transition from the 2/3 that members can access before. So for their first time house, you can draw up 21% from your preserve, but you have to repay that amount. So when the next 5 years, when you make contributions, it goes to a preserve account.
I see. So it's not like it's my money, I'm going to retire with that, I can do with it what I want, taking out 21%. I need to pay that back.
No. Yes.
You know what I'm glad about that you brought up housing, in fact, is the fact that, do you know that the processing fees for that is $100?
Really?
Yeah. Quick repairs come up to $50, whereas early withdrawals are $10. Why are they so high, though? Processing fees.
Good question. It's something that we have debated about. There's actually a cost of doing these things. It's actually much higher than the fees that we have. We're not advocating for pay, but it's also there to prevent members from just putting in money for whatever or applying for anything.
So you mean it's a preventative measure for us as members to
and the
dig
good
into
thing
our
now,
account?
you can deduct it from your withdrawal amount. You can actually, rather than pay cash, you just opt to deduct the balance, that amount, from the money that you're taking out.
So of course all those processing fees would be counted as fees paid to FNPF.
Yes, it's part of the fees at FNPF. It's a small amount, but it's also something that we continue to debate about.
Given all these different types of withdrawals that people can make, have you come across instances where you have people taking out money and then misusing it, and then you catch them? Do you have, solvency or transparency plans in place to make sure that they don't do that?
That's actually a very good question, because we have actually taken people actually in prison for falsifying the information. And this is a very important point. It actually will be publishing, coming back to the media on that, because if you falsify the information, you will be taken to court for that.
And what has been the most common type of falsification?
The most recent one, recently the most common ones are falsifying your suspension letter or the termination letter from your employer. So basically people forge termination so that they can draw on their unemployment amount. And we have taken actually 2 cases. Members have actually ended up in jail for 6 months.
So lesson for members listening in right now.
It is. It's falsifying information because this money is for your retirement.
Yeah.
So that's falsifying information when it comes to, say, for example, or taking withdrawals out like that. What about people who falsify information or tend to try to loophole things when it comes to, say, for example, flood assistance? What if they apply for it and it's not really their house, or they're just looking after it for somebody else?
Yes, it's also very important because we work very closely with the Turangani corals and the councillors. When we go to a settlement, okay, we rely on them to tell us, okay, these houses were flooded. But what we found that when we turn up in these villages, it's crowded with all other people who just turn up, and the Turangani corals and the councillors allow this. Some of them allow it. But when we tell them you are liable, if you falsify, you can be taken to task. And so they take back the names and the reasons. So it's quite, but I guess it's awareness that we need to create. If it's really not, you don't really need it for this purpose, don't take it.
Do you think you'd be putting in more stringent measures to sort of screen members before they can touch their own money?
The screening is there. I think it's just the awareness. First, members need to know that, okay, this is my money. You contribute to it, the employer contribute to it, and also FNPF puts interest on it. If you look at it from the aggregate level, in the last 5 years, FNPF has credited members $1 billion in member balance, members' money. Only 500 million came through the net contributions, which is really the difference between contributions and withdrawals. So in the last 5 years at aggregate level, FNPF has helped more in terms of building member balances than what members put in.
Speaking of members, is this a new initiative that FNPF put forward where you have children as young as 6 years old who can now open up accounts? Is that some sort of a measure to put in place to sort of
I believe that's happening towards the end of the year, or probably
Well, that
next
would
year.
be starting off soon.
Yeah.
Yes, the legislation allows for it. We're just working through, because it's not as straightforward. We need to know minors, because they come under minors.
Yeah.
Minors, there's a different process of who will be responsible for this.
Exactly.
This
I
would
mean,
be the voluntary accounts, right?
yes, this would be
Yeah.
voluntary
Voluntary,
accounts, but
yeah.
I had a look at it. You have to have someone putting in a minimum of, I think, $7. Is that right?
Yes, it's a minimum $7 a month, I think, or fortnight is what.
But wouldn't that put a financial burden, say, for example, on parents and guardians who already are members and they have their own accounts and they would have another account, say, for example, their child or their guardian?
I think the idea is give them that opportunity.
Why in that sense? Like, what's wrong with them investing in an insurance firm, putting money? Why FNPF?
I think the FNPF, I guess members need to understand all these financial products have different purposes.
Yeah.
Insurance is a totally different purpose. FNPF is a retirement fund. Bank is, you can save money. It's like savings. You can invest with unit trust. So these are the different things, different risks that you take as a member. With FNPF, given the pool of funds that we have, it's much lower risk from that perspective. It's also tax-free. It gives that long-term perspective to investment. You put in the bank, it's more like in your pocket. You can go in and out anytime. For insurance, it's totally different. It covers your life. So the endowment portion for it is a bit low. If you compare, the interest is quite low. But it's for different purpose. So this literacy or this expo actually provides members to actually choose between all these options.
And speaking of interest, what interest is
Kathy,
FNPF sitting on right now?
We'd like to get back into that maybe a little bit more in detail,
Yeah.
but we'll do that right after the break.
Good evening and welcome back. Now, Mr. Kure, we were talking about interest before. At what number, or rather, what's the interest now for members in line with FNPF?
Last year, our financial year ends in June.
Yeah.
We paid out 6.35%. That's equivalent to about 270 million. 270 million, it comes out of the profit that we make. Last year, the FNPF made 359 million in terms of net profit.
Oh.
So out of that money, we declared interest of 6.35. It's about 270 million to members.
That's deposited into their whole 100% account? Does that go to like a
70
70%?
or-
70-30.
70-30.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah,
So it comes out, say, for example, I receive $100, 70%
yeah.
goes into...
$30 go to your
Right.
general account and $70 to your preserve account.
Okay. With interest that's being earned, and of course with the money that FNPF is making for its members, there's many different portfolios that you have. There's many different avenues that you have. Could you please tell us more? Because maybe the layman doesn't understand. Where is FNPF getting all this money from?
Yes. The money that we receive from members needs to be invested. So we grow your money, members' money, for their retirement. There's basically an investment policy statement that we follow that guides us in where to invest, what types of risks we need to take. Majority of our investments, the bulk of our investments are with government bonds currently.
Okay.
They pay quite good in terms of return. So the yield that we have, then we invest in companies like Vodafone, we own HFC, Telecom, all those companies that pay us dividend at the end of the year.
I'm glad you brought up government bonds. Would you or would FNPF be investing in EFL, given that there are 45% shares that are up for
EFL, is it?
EFL?
It's
currently known as FEA.
Yes. We have been in that process through the government's privatization program.
Yeah.
We are working with partners. Actually, we're in that process now.
Okay.
So those.
Would you mind telling us exactly how much shares FNPF is planning to buy?
At this stage, it's a bit too early
Okay.
because it's a government process. It's a tender process. We are not the only party. There are other parties that may be interested. But these types of investments are the investments that it's good for the
It's
members.
a good, because EFL
Yes.
makes a profit. They do not ever make a loss,
Yes.
given that they're the only monopoly in the country. All right.
This
I'm just saying this because it's good for me as a member.
So say, for example, you're a member of FNPF and you're also an FEA account holder, so you'd be receiving shares from there and
Exactly.
you'd also be receiving some money payout. on the
Win-win
side.
situation.
Yes. Those are the types of investments that we look for our members, because we invest on behalf of the members. Infrastructure projects, these types of investments that gives long-term return to the fund, particularly for the members.
With the online portal now available to members, they can check their deductions, they can check the progress of their account and all. You've also mentioned off the record, of course, about how you can check how much has been deducted from your payslip, from your gross pay, that is, from your employers, and of course your own contribution. We can check that what's happening right now. But does it have a history? Can you check with previous deductions? Because you may have instances where
Had a lot of
employers,
jobs.
yeah, you've had other jobs, and your employer would say that they're paying it, but you just don't feel like it's going into your account. Something seems a little fishy.
That's something that we continue to face. Members coming to us to say that, okay, deductions have been made, but it's not hitting the FNPF account. So these platforms that we use can actually helps us to engage more effectively with our members. They need, you can actually be alerted if the money hits your account, we alert you. So if it's not, then you have advised us, is my FNPF coming? So we have, because we act for the members. Members can't take their employer to task for non-payment. We have the legal powers to take the employers for non-deductions of FNPF. It's a serious error, serious flaw for employers to deduct, and that's fraud. And they are liable to be taken to court for that. So we have, there's a few complaints that we go through, and there's also a recovery process that we need to take with the employers.
And of course, when it comes to retirement, all of that does come into play.
Oh,
if
yeah.
your employer does not
Yeah.
pay your contributions, you don't have that money left for you when
That's
you
right.
retire.
That's right.
Hence your awareness programs, and of course with the retirement expo that was held recently. Any last few words for those who are listening in right now, maybe those members who would be retiring soon or who would be thinking about their retirement options?
I think awareness, I encourage members to register, to be registered online so that they can increase their engagement level with us. You don't need to just come to FNPF when you need money. You can check your balances, you can plan for your retirement. These are the ways that we can work together with members to make sure that they have some plan for retirement.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you so much for coming on the show. That wraps out our show for tonight. If you'd like more information on the topics discussed tonight, you can access FNPF's website, www.myfnpf.com.fj, or visit any of their 9 branches in the Central, Western and Northern divisions. And we hope that you enjoy the show. Have a pleasant evening.